Software licensing therapy. Software license therapy.
Hello, and welcome to the next episode of our podcast, The Software Licensing Therapy. My name is Taco, and I'm joined today with my podcast partner, Ira. Welcome, Ira.
Hello, and thank you.
Today in the podcast, we are going to talk about do software companies still audit? And this is kind of a hot question because if I recall the discussions I was involved in during the years, everybody thought that when the software vendors moved to cloud delivered software, cloud services, the audit would be killed. The question is, has that really happened? My opinion is it hasn't. It makes the audit just faster. Where previously the vendors needed to ask you about information and the only reference they had was your contract. Now, because of cloud services, they have more access to information than you probably are aware of. So, does it really happen? Yes or no? Ira, have you heard anything in the market about audit still happening or not?
Well, what I hear is that they do still happen, but like you're saying, it's in a different manner, which is quite natural. I would say if we look back some years when this shift started to happen, going from perpetual licensing to more subscription-based licensing, I think of the big major vendors, Adobe was the first one out, and I remember it so clearly that they actually did stop what they called audits back then. And I remember also that all of my customers were so happy about that happening. And we were also, I was on the reseller side, so we were also a little bit confused, like, hey, what's going on? Even these big audit teams they went into other roles and did other things. The thing is that even though maybe the audits in that manner did stop at the time, and as other vendors went along with subscriptions, they also stopped doing audits in that sense. But I think it was quite scary, actually, because that also meant that customers were most likely overspending more than before when they were non-compliant. And then, like you were saying, I mean, the vendors have a better opportunity of seeing what you're actually using, because you need to activate a subscription to be able to use it.
Absolutely.
So I would say no, audits have not stopped, but I probably would not call them audits anymore. It's something else. So let's talk about that as well.
Yeah, I think they're still kind of audits. You're definitely right that if you go back like 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit more, there was definitely a decrease in frequency of audits or audit requests that you get as a company. I've been involved in various license audits over the years that I was working in the space of procurement, but also in software asset management. And the ones I've seen coming by were VMware, Microsoft, Oracle, just to name a few. Yes, it did go down, but there is a slight trend back as far as I can see. 2023 and onwards, there has been an increase again in license audits. And the one that springs to mind that scared most people was when Oracle made Oracle Java after a certain version licensable. At least you needed to have a support contract in order to justify any updates or use the later versions. That triggered a flurry of audits by Oracle. Have then they gone to court? I don't know. I've heard a few rumors that some were audited or went to court or threatened to go to court. but usually audits are settled before it gets to that point. Well, why do they still audit? Cloud does not kill the audit. That's what we already said in the beginning.
Yeah.
It has given the vendors better telemetry on what information there is. But there is still room for using software or using products of the vendors that most likely are not in line with the terms and conditions. One particular one that springs to mind that I read about recently has to do with the famous client access licenses from Microsoft. And even though people think, does that still exist? Well, actually it does. And many companies forget that when they connect users or systems to an SQL server or to something else, that there is a significant chance that you're not sufficiently licensed for client access licenses or device access licenses. Is this ringing a bell to you, Ira?
Well, yeah, from some conversations, definitely, and specifically when people ask about how do I license this scenario and that scenario, and I would say it's so much more about I don't like the word complexity, but I need to use it here because there is complexity on a completely different level. You have various different devices, and yes, we've had various different devices, but now when licensing models move to subscriptions and they are more user based, but you still have devices that are not used by one single user or is used by multiple users. That brings a lot of complexity into how do you license all of these different type of devices in the best possible way. And the fact that the previous device licensing is not there in the same way anymore. There comes a more complexity around the user and the devices. And also looking to the service side, I mean, the cloud move, it has gone far. So everybody is nowadays in the cloud in one way or the other. Not everybody, but most companies and organizations are. And you use your previous perpetual licensing with support contracts and with software assurance, and you're in hybrid cloud, so you use them a little bit here and a little bit there. And that also brings a level of complexity into where you really need to go into that dirty detail of that specific or those specific vendor licensing terms that you have. So there is definitely a window of opportunity for doing audits if we look at it from the vendor side. And I think it might even increase more than what you were saying that we're seeing already because of this complexity moving around. And so that's just my thinking.
Yeah, I agree.
Around it.
I think that there is a level of complexity when it comes to subscription licenses with all the different functionalities that are included often in those licenses. We were into that certain vendors, they have far more access to telemetry. I recall a discussion I had a couple of years ago with ServiceNow, because in their licensing model, there is no ceiling. So even if I've bought 100 licenses of, for example, ITSM Pro, I can still enable 110, or I can enable 120. There's nothing stopping me system-wise to do that. But then when you read the fine print, it actually says that if over a period of 3 months you have overused your licenses, you need to correct your license position by either removing the licenses or buying. And if you don't do it yourself, I have seen that ServiceNow is knocking on your door and is telling you, listen, for the last 3 months, you have used more licenses than you actually have bought. Please send a purchase order for the additional licenses. Now, that's an example. Is that an audit? It's, I would say, a soft audit, but it's an audit in the sense of they have the telemetry. You're not in compliance with the agreement that you signed with them, and now you need to correct.
Yeah.
Previously, you could go into discussions with the vendor because they did not have such telemetry overall, and then it became a discussion, and you probably as a company had more leeway to adjust before information was to be sent to the vendor. Now they see it. And the most notorious companies that historically audited a lot were Oracle, Microsoft, SAP, IBM, VMware, and the list goes on. And I haven't heard through my network that they've stopped doing that. So it's still there. And
Yeah.
the moment when they often do that is either when you make significant changes to your license position, or when it's time to renew your agreement. That's typically when they are triggered. Or if you haven't changed anything in your license position during a very long time, and obviously they read your company reports, they see what's happening. So they may be starting questions as well, why did your license position stay the same, but your company changed? So it's an interesting one. What do you think about that the vendors have such access to telemetry information now, and also keeping in mind that we have a lot of data privacy laws in place these days?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's on the one hand good. And I would say I would like to see the first vendor coming and saying, hey, company X, we can see that you have purchased 120 of these licenses, but you're only using 80. That would be like a reverse audit then. But I think that would build trust in a different manner, and also help the customers who have so many software vendors to actually look at. And I think that would be a great idea. On the other hand, I don't know how much insights the vendor should have into a customer's environment, because sometimes, or not the environment itself, but into the license position. Because I still see that it is, like I was saying, it's a trust business. So you still need to trust your customer of wanting to do the right thing, which I also, well, at least my experience is that all customers I've worked with over my 20 plus years in the industry is that you want to do the right thing. However, the complexity and the difficult terms and how to interpret the terms makes it quite hard for a customer to actually do the right thing. But I on one hand, I do actually like it if it would be used also in the position to say, look, you're over licensing yourself right now. But I don't think it's used that way.
Yeah. So one of the questions I get, I think there's two sides to that. So the first one is, can I say no to an audit? Well, the first one, the response to that is go back to your contract, because in most of your contracts, audit rights are usually described in some way. Then they say, where does your audit defense start? It actually starts when you buy, because that's the point where you potentially have the possibility to amend audit clauses in your contract, either by removing them, which is hard, but sometimes you have the option that you can change the frequency of them. So that's the first one. Also, you need to know, what does the contract say about what your obligations are when you are targeted for an audit. Because in some of the clauses of the vendors, it states clearly what they are expecting from you to deliver. But ultimately, don't hand over data just because you have an audit clause. First of all, you need to know what you have bought. You need to have information about how it is deployed. So you need to have data. If you have no data, and the first moment that you start to gather the data is when you're targeted for an audit, you're too late. Because often you have timelines to abide by in how you respond and when you respond. So data discipline is very important. Don't over disclose. Be very clear in getting a description of what they are asking, what are they entitled to ask and get from you, and how do you provide that information. I've seen vendors previously providing their own tools and saying, run this on your network and then give me the output. Well, usually those tools gather far more information than you contractually are obliged to provide. So you're already there providing them information that makes it more difficult. So you need to be in control. You need to have your own processes, and you have to have one voice. They often try to go to multiple people in your organization and try to gather information. But you need to streamline and have one voice, one information and communication line. And ultimately, it's about understanding your rights, understanding how to negotiate and how to discuss that. Have you seen things go wrong in that to that extent, Ira?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's some years ago now when I was involved on that level in a customer audit. I was not the auditor. I was supporting the customer with their audit process. But I mean, there are so many things that can go wrong. And like you're saying, like the big red flag is with these vendor tools, to try to avoid the usage of them. And I mean, most companies today have some sort of software asset management tool. You are able to collect the data, the inventory data. Normally, you also, a little bit depending on who the vendor obviously is who does the audit, but normally you also do have access from your reseller to the procurement data, so you can actually see what licenses you've bought. And I would say also to take in that additional support from someone who has the experience of the audit work if you don't have it yourself. Because really being prepared is key, like you're saying. And I think also what you mentioned, and I think maybe just to clarify that a little bit more, to have the internal alignment around how do we handle an audit, who is our spokesperson, which department is responsible, who says what and who doesn't say anything, just to be very clear about making sure that procurement, software asset management team, legal, I don't know, maybe even IT department, depending on who does the audit, maybe workplace or the server people or whoever it might be, just to make sure that everybody is aligned. This is how we handle an audit. And I think that has been key in good audits and in not so good audits.
I totally agree with what you say. I've seen emails being sent by the vendor to an IT technician asking them to just pull some logs from a server and mail them over. That's where it starts. As you say, alignment is knowing that your whole organization knows that if a vendor asks someone to send over information, that you just don't do that immediately. You need to go back into your organization through your processes and make sure that the right people are being aware of the questions being asked, and then take a stance in how are you going to respond to this. The other thing that springs to mind is, well, when you are in an audit situation, Are there things not to say? Well, I have a few of not to say. Well, the first one is, well, I don't know, which opens up for a lot of debate, because if you give an indication to the vendor that you don't know what you have and why you have it, then they open up a lot in asking questions, and then they feel that they can ask far more to you than if you say, well, I know how to react, I know how to handle, or say, sure, I can send that over. No, you can't say that. You have to make sure, as you were into era, that you have checked your contractual obligations, that you have checked with your legal team in how and what to answer, or say, well, we're probably non-compliant. Uh, I've heard that people say that, which means that you already undermine your negotiation position in case there is a non-compliance. We trust your numbers. If you say that to the vendor, meaning you're not in control, you don't know. It's only for testing. There are often many rules around how and what you can do in test situations,
Yeah.
or one to talk about data privacy. Well, HR can pull our headcount information for you, so there's a lot not to do, but ultimately having good process in place, understanding your rights, knowing your contracts, know what you have,
Yeah.
will provide you a better starting point and position if you are targeted for audits. And I guess many companies still are targeted for audits. You never know when it comes, but you need to be prepared. Absolutely be prepared.
Yeah.
So being
And
audited is not unusual. It still
no.
happens.
Yeah.
Being unprepared is where it can get very expensive.
Indeed, and I would want to add that I sense that many people within organizations think that the licensing knowledge that was really required previously when you had perpetual licensing and you needed to buy all the stuff, that it was more essential then than now. But I would say it's the opposite. Having licensing know-how, I mean, it's impossible to have it on every vendor you have in your environment, but having it in-house to some extent on your major. We normally talk about the 20-80 rule. So 20% of your vendors where you spend 80% of your money. Might be a little bit different nowadays with subscriptions, but still, your top vendors, you should have some sort of internal licensing know-how. And as a second step, you need to have a network around you where you can actually go and grab more of that knowledge. So I would say it's really an undervalued piece of knowledge today in organizations. I would say, because you think that, yeah, but I have subscriptions, so I don't need to know. But it's really important because of the complexity, like that we were talking about. What I also want to say is that even though many vendors talk about this clear line between an audit team and a sales team, I mean, doing an audit at the end of the day, the end goal for the vendor, doing an audit is about adding more revenue to their organization. So the preparation you were talking about, making sure that you have the internal alignment and that you actually have a process in place. If it's an easy process, it doesn't matter. When you sit down in that first call, you just say, all right, we understand the situation. This is how our process works, and make sure that the vendor just accepts that. And then you will know how to follow protocol in your organization and be go out in a good way from the audit.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of to wrap it up, is an audit a bad thing? It can be extremely challenging if you're not prepared. It can be extremely challenging if you don't know what you have. But it also provides you an opportunity. And the
Yes.
opportunity, if you just kind of take away the vendor side of it, it gives you an opportunity to reshape processes in your organization. It may service licenses that you were unaware of that were there because they may not have been procured through the normal procurement cycles. So it gives you an opportunity to clean house. It gives you an opportunity to maybe shelve old versions of software that come to light because you are being targeted for an audit. It's painful, it can be costly, but it's not necessarily always a bad thing. Will software audits continue to happen for the foreseeable future? Yes. Will it become less challenging? No, I don't think so. So overall, back to it, be prepared, know what you have your processes in place. That's your best defense against an audit, because defense you will need. I've been in 4 or 5 different audits over the last 5 to 10 years, and none of them ended in the initial claim of what the vendor said that we were due to pay. In 3 out of 5, there was no payment at all. In 2 out of 5, it was a very small payment to correct some support contracts that were not in line with the licensing terms and conditions. But it's time consuming, and you need to be persistent and not always give in to the vendor. So yes, they happen. It's still a fact of life. It will be a fact of life as long as software licensing is around. So great to talk to you about this topic, Ira.
Really nice, Taco, and I think you summarized it very well. So that was everything from software licensing therapy for today. We look forward to having you listen to us again. Thank you for today, Taco, and see you soon again.
Thank you, Ira. Bye-bye.